Good evening, everyone. Tonight is February 9th, 2022. This is the City of Columbus City Council meeting, and we're using a hybrid interactive technology format. So all of our votes tonight will be roll call votes. Before we begin, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to letter B, would someone like to make a motion on the consent agenda?
So this is Janet. I understand we're removing items 5 and 6 from the consent agenda. Whoops, and 7. So I will move to approve consent agenda items 3, 4 with the following amendments, and 8. And the amendments to number 4 are on page 3. There was, the sentence currently reads, Griffith noted
Recording in progress.
that those businesses do not exist legally if they are operating with a permit, and it should be without a permit. This is about residential zone businesses. On page 5, the current sentence reads, Council members Bush and Wagaman expressed their disagreement. This is about having CSOs, noting that they are not in favor of decreasing resources for enforcing city ordinances. And I just changed that, or suggested the edit that said, not in favor of eliminating the CSO from the contract. And then on page, sorry, that was page 5. Page 4, the sentence currently reads, excuse me, Hagelin continued to report that because the city switched to a 2-tiered health insurance plan last year, additional money must be added to the levy. What I said was must be added to the benefits budget, but no increase to the levy is required as dollars are available to be reallocated from other items. And then the following sentence would be changed to this reallocation must be approved by the council from as such funds were reallocated and must be approved by the council.
Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any questions on the changes or any part of it? Or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Jesse, aye. Thank you, Janet, for finding all those.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're on to letter C already. Public open forum. Is there anyone here who would like to speak at public open forum or online? Hearing no one, we'll move to a public hearing. And this regards the Conduit hearing for Blake School. I believe Julie Eddington is tuned in to us. So would you like to go ahead a little bit, Julie, and give us a primer on all of this again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Julie Eddington. I'm with Kennedy and Graben. I have represented the city of Columbus for many years as their bond attorney and their development attorney. Tonight, we have before you a request to hold a public hearing and approve a resolution that's in your packets with respect to the issuance of conduit bonds for the Blake School. And there are Blake School representatives in the audience if you'd like to ask them questions about the project. But generally speaking, what they're going to use the bonds for is refunding a bond issue they did in 2015, and then also new money to create an early learning center in Hopkins. The city of Hopkins has provided host approval to the city of Columbus to be able to issue these bonds. And I would also like to point out to the audience and to the city council that if you do agree to issue these bonds, they do not have any impact on your credit rating moving forward. If there's any issue with the bonds, if there's a default or an IRS audit or any sort of problem, the Blake School is required under the documents to pay for any costs related to those issues. And the city has no obligation to pay the bonds if there's any sort of default. The one thing I would mention though is that the city, because the bonds are in the amount of $35 million, that the city itself would not be able to issue any bank qualified bonds this year. And I think we talked about that the last meeting a little bit. You can't, they can, the city can still issue general obligation bonds that aren't bank qualified. But as I understand from speaking to Elizabeth, the city does not plan to issue any bonds this year, so that shouldn't be an issue for the city. If there are any questions from the city council, I'd be happy to answer those.
At this point, Julie, there isn't. I will ask a couple of questions here. First, from Elizabeth. As we discussed earlier, the city has no plans to bond for the rest of the year, so that issue is pretty much off the table. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Mayor. We do not have any plans for bond issuance in 2022.
Okay, very good. And so now, in the hot seat is,
Good evening, Mr.
pull your
Mayor.
mic a little closer, or, here we go.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Dan Kelly. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Blake. We're a pre-K through 12 independent school in Hopkins. And thank you very much for considering our proposal. As Julie mentioned, we have designed a new building for our earliest learners, pre-K, K, and first grade, 165 students. Be environmentally friendly, LEED certified building opening in August of 2023. And this bond is one of several sources we'll be using to finance the construction of the school.
All right, thank you. So, anybody have any questions at this point? If not, I'll go back to Julie. Are there any questions we're not asking that we should?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe so.
All right, very good. So, council, we all understand what this is going to be used for. We understand what it means to us.
Yeah, I think we got, this is Sue, we had all of our questions answered at the last meeting, and yeah, I don't have any other questions, and I'm
Fine.
good to go.
All right. All right, Elizabeth, what's our next step?
So, Mr. Mayor and council members and Julie Eddington, I just want to make sure on the agenda tonight, I have the resolution, but I understand that we have to hold a public hearing. So we will open the public hearing next, ask if there's any comment on this particular bond issuance, and then we'll close the hearing, and then there's a resolution. And my question to Julie is, do we have to formally approve the deed application through the council, or is that something that we just do afterwards?
It does not need to be approved. I believe that we have approved it in the note resolution that's before you.
So, just open a public hearing?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you can open a public hearing and invite comment, that would be great.
Thank you. So, I would like to open a public hearing regarding conduit bonding for Blake School. We've had a meeting or two on this and discussed it. And at this time, I would like to know if there's any comments from the public or any comments from anyone online regarding this issue. So, hearing no comments, I will close this portion of the hearing with the right to reopen it. it sound any better? Yeah,
We were getting feedback, so I think the two mics might have been feeding back to each other.
all right. So other than the technical difficulties, is there anyone here who has any questions on the topic? In hearing none, I'll call for a vote for the approval of the conduit bonding for Blake School.
You need a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I think we need, Jessica, if we have a resolution number for the council.
Yep, it's resolution 22-02.
22-02. So the motion would be to approve the resolution 22-02, authorizing the issuance of a revenue obligation bonds to benefit the Blake School. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Is there any questions or more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote.
Sue, I.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Shelley, I.
And Jesse, aye. There we go.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Congrats.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I appreciate it. Good night.
Have a good night. So now we will move on to number 11, a public hearing and motion for 16658 Iverson Street abatement order. And this is on pages 10 through 13 in our packet.
Council, Mayor, we have a memo in the packet here explaining some background on this issue. In December of last year, the council made the decision to set a public hearing on the issuance of an abatement order on this property. Just a little bit of background, there was a permit to install a swimming pool on this property, and the permit was granted. The pool was installed. However, the required security fence was not. Minspect and the city has been working with the property owner since May of last year to have to have the security fence installed, and no progress has been made to this day on installing that fence. So as such, the council has directed staff to work on abating the issue. I also have online is Tracy Ryman from Minspect. If you have any questions for him regarding, the correspondence that went to the property owner. And in your packet is also the recommended abatement order that, if you do so vote tonight, would be sent out to the property owner. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Otherwise, we will have to open a public hearing to take comment.
Are there, are there any questions or more discussion? Anybody?
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, just for clarification, you had additions and the summary of activity, there was 11 pages. That is the report from Tracy Ryman, who is on the Zoom call with us today. He's the one who put that report together. And then also in your regular packet is where, as Jessica indicated, that's where the hearing notice and the order and the letter went to the applicant. So there's two places where materials are at.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So has everyone, you see this pack?
Mr. Mayor and council members, would you like Tracy just to briefly go over the materials that he has and his experience with the property owner?
Sure, that'd be good.
Good evening, everybody. This is Tracy Ryman. Yes, I sent an activity summary to the city with just the background on this. Over the course of the last 8 months, 10 months, there've been numerous emails, phone calls. I did stop in on one occasion and was able to speak with um, uh, one of the people, Ron, regarding what the status was. And at that time, he was planning to find another contractor to finish the the project. And after that, I followed up, left messages, received a message back that he's working on it, but to date, nothing has been done. During this time, I've sent 3 different letters out to him requesting a plan of attack on this. And I've not gotten any response on that. At this point, I don't know if there's any intent to abate the nuisance and get a fence around that. And that's kind of where we're at right now, asking council for an order to proceed with an abatement order, please.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay.
So we've been aware of this issue for some time.
Yep.
2 or 3 or 4 years. And we have talked about it, discussed it. And so I believe at this time I would like to open a public hearing regarding the issuance of abatement order at 16658 Iverson Street. So the hearing is open. Is there anyone in the audience or on the Zoom call who would like to contribute to our discussion tonight? Hearing none, I'll close. Oop. Go ahead.
May we present comment?
Certainly.
Bob and Candace Barrons, we reside at 16726 West Iverson Street, 2 doors to the north of said property we're discussing here this evening. We would like to provide comment on a larger scale than just the pool fencing that's been in existence for temporary fencing that's been knocked over and trashes up the property. But the property in general is, in our opinion, a nuisance to the neighborhood because of all the junk, materials, and trash on property. So it devalues our property when we have to go through and look at that. Our neighbors go through and look at that. Realtors go through and look at that. Appraisers look at it. And it devalues our property. And so on a larger scale, I understand that you're directly looking at the pool and the fencing, but it's a part of a larger issue that we wanted to present to council.
Thank you for your comment.
Oh, can I say something?
Certainly.
And it's more than just garbage strewn about. He's got tow trucks, he's got straight trucks, he's got pickup trucks. They're just littering the whole place. It looks like a junkyard there, in addition to the house next to it too. So it's kind of we're getting a double whammy there.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this issue? Hearing and seeing no one, I'll close this portion of the hearing with the right to reopen it as necessary. Would someone like to make the motion?
This is Sue. I can make the motion. So I move to approve the issuance of abatement order to property owner at 16658 Iverson Street as written.
And is there a second?
This is Janet. I actually would second it, but I don't have the abatement order in my packet. So is there a way that I can see it?
On page 12 and 13?
of the new packet?
Of the original packet.
I know, but my page 12 and 13 is Caribou Coffee. Thank you.
Same here.
It's yours too? Yeah, it just didn't make it into my packets. I thought that was, so I'll skim it really quick. I mean, I know the situation, so I think I'm pretty comfortable. I just wanted to look at it really quick.
So, question on it would be then, since I haven't been able to read that yet, would we be going in and then hiring a contractor to install the fence? Is that what we're voting on?
No, you're voting on the issuance of the order. This is Elizabeth Mersko, and I'll go back to my microphone.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Elizabeth, if you want, I can address that question.
Yes, thank
So
you.
this is a process under our code that allows for the city to affirmatively act and clean up the property, address the fencing, essentially, not the other issues that were raised in the hearing. And it allows the city then to assess the costs against the property. Before that can be done, a final notice abatement order is issued to the property owner, giving them a specific deadline to clean up the property to address the fencing issue. So that's the next step in the process. So the city, would hope and expect not to have to go onto the property and correct the fence, but that authority exists under Minnesota statutes and our city code. And so the property owner Jessica did a nice job with the abatement order. I think it's very clear that is the ultimate remedy and would allow the city to collect costs, including the cost of the work that's been done to date.
So this is Jen. I have one other question. So the deadline to have this corrected is March 31st. Does it have to be put out that far? Is that a requirement to put it out that far in advance, since there's been so much communication on this?
I think it isn't necessarily a requirement. It would be a reasonable time under the circumstances. I do think, given the winter, given delays in contracting, just hiring a contractor to finish the work, that may actually be a reasonable amount of time. I certainly understand that this has taken a long time and a lot of resources to get here. But I think under the current circumstances, it might be considered a reasonable time frame.
Thank you. I'll second the motion.
Yeah, and also, you're correct, Bill, there's still frost in the ground on March 31st. You'd have to have a jackhammer and everything else. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other questions or discussion on the topic? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Shelley, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Thank you, council members.
Thank
If
you,
the
Jessica.
deadline passes without any action, we would come back to you to talk through logistics for how the abatement would occur.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome.
On to number 12, Planning Commission report.
Jesse, or Mayor, I just had one more thing on that. So what are our steps moving forward then with the rest of what's going on with that property? Sorry to not bring that up under discussion, but.
Counselor Griffith, so this is the fence.
Yes.
What about
Mr. Mayor and Council, we're certainly aware of the other issues. I think the neighbors are free to make a specific complaint to the city. That's often how other matters are enforced, other code enforcement actions begin. I don't know offhand if other complaints have been received, but we will certainly then act on them in the normal course. Because we have kind of reactivated this portion of the code, and because there are costs involved, we might continue to follow the abatement process so that the city is not left holding the cost of a cleanup. But I would encourage anybody who has a concern, including those who testified tonight, to go ahead and make a specific complaint to the city.
And I'd like to add as well that specifically the vehicles that are being stored, that complaint has gone to the courts, and there was there are charges pending against the property owner. The original court date was yesterday. However, it was extended to it's mid-April sometime. So that court date on the box truck issue, the first appearance will be occurring now in April.
So this is Janet. I mean, thank you for that reminder, Jessica, because I know we did talk about this and we talked about moving forward with abatement for that problem, but because there was already a court date scheduled, felt it was prudent to let that play out, and predicted that it would get extended, and in fact, it did. So that's too bad, but, I mean, we are keeping our eye on this, and I guess we'll have to see what happens in April.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Back to the planning commissioner. Okay, Rob, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
Good
you,
enough?
Mayor.
Yep.
Janet.
Planning Commission report, number 12, Bob Barrons is the reporting tonight.
City staff, Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Bob Barrons with the Planning Commission. I would like to provide the City Council with an update on the most recent activities of the Planning Commission, last meeting dated February 2nd, 2022. Other than the normal administrative duties, at the last meeting, the Planning Commission hosted a public hearing and discussion to consider a variance request made by ENR Investments for a proposed project at the Northeast Quad 35 Second Edition, Caribou Coffee Cabin. Prior to the public meeting, city staff reviewed the variance request and presented their report of findings to the Planning Commission. City staff then recommended that the Planning Commission approve the variance request as presented. The Planning Commission then discussed these findings. In addition, Mr. Hayes from ENR then also presented information about the variance requests and answered questions from the Planning Commission. After a lengthy discussion, a motion was then made by the Planning Commission to approve the variance request based on adopting city staff report facts, findings of fact 1 through 6, dated February 1, 2022, with the following conditions. The Planning Commission also made a motion to request that the City Council provide the Planning Commission direction to investigate the following ordinance concerns related to this matter. Number one, to better define and develop better interpretation of which masonry products will be allowed for building design requirements, the required percentage of masonry for building design allowed, and standards for corporate colors. Number two, to provide the Planning Commission guidance on the light ordinance interpretation and building size requirements in the commercial zoning districts. The Planning Commission recommends the City Council approve the variance requests as presented, and we ask that you also give us further guidance on reviewing these ordinances. That concludes my report, and I'll answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Mayor and Council, there are two other items under the Planning Commission report, and that is the Planning Commission did discuss several items afterwards for the coming out of the variance application for Caribou Coffee. But if you want to take each item separately, we can certainly do that, but there's two other motions that need to be made for the Planning Commission report.
All right. So let's take the first motion. Would someone like to make?
Yeah, I can make the motion. This is Rob. Move to approve ENR Investments variance request as outlined in the staff report dated 2/1/2022 for Lot 1, Block 1, Northeast Quad 35 Second Edition, based on the findings of 1 through 6, subject to conditions 1 through 3 of the staff report dated 2/1/2022.
Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions or discussion from anybody?
This is Councilman Logren.
Go ahead,
I
Shelley.
have a statement that I would like to make.
Go ahead.
Okay, I as you well know, I disagree with the definition of the Caribou Cabin in that it is a coffee stand, not a coffee shop. The original parcel to be sold was in conjunction with another project on the east side of the northeast corner. That particular project did not go through, and the parcel was kept for the Caribou Cabin in the configuration that it stands now. I believe that this detracts from the other portion of the eastern portion of the northeast corner. I think that it creates a dogleg for the piece that is remaining and is not in our best interest to create that shape. The original idea was to have a coffee shop, and this was presented at a closed meeting to the council in order to buy the parcel, and it was acted on as a coffee shop, meaning not a coffee stand. When I use the term coffee stand, I'm using a coffee industry definition. This was, even though we voted on the coffee shop, I do not know at that time whether Caribou considered it being a stand or a shop at that point. Columbus representatives found out when they were going to sign the purchase agreement on behalf of the council that the cabin was the proposed use for the land. The staff said that they were disappointed, but they continued with the transaction, even though the council had sanctioned a coffee shop. It was at this point that I feel that it should have been brought back to the council for approval as a drive-by only. And I want to make it clear that at this point, I believe it also should have been talked with the Caribou people about what they were going to put on the property, that perhaps a chalet or a lodge would have been more in line with the zoning and the design standards for the area. And I also want to note that Dunn Brothers and Starbucks both have many locations that have the required, brick and mortar. The Columbus City Planner offered changes at the time when it was brought to the Planning Commission that would conform with the standards for the area. The Planning Commission agreed, but voted for the cabin design. Design requires several variances, of which my major complaint is that the cabin design is a stick construction and does not conform to the majority requirement of brick and mortar. I disagree with the findings of fact. I do not believe that the practical difficulty of the landowner is, I believe the practical difficulty of the landowner is created by the landowner because it's just they want to have what they want to have. I think it will alter the essential character of the neighborhood, which was to be designed at the highest standards and to create a mixed use, meaning that there would be people living there and using the facilities there. I don't think that it's consistent with a comprehensive plan. I don't think it's in harmony with the intent of the zoning ordinance. And I think that there are just practical difficulties with the entire project. In addition, I do not appreciate the strong arm tactics by the applicant and or their representatives with the developer in this transaction in dealing with the Planning Commission and the Columbus Council. I fervently hope that further discussions for development in the northeast corner, this corner that the city owns, will keep in mind the high standards that were so carefully set over the last 2 years. I will not be in favor of this variance request. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this topic?
Well, this is Sue. I just wanted to give my piece also. I'm just starting my second year on the council, so I wasn't part of all, the last 2 years of the development of the ordinances. but I did vote on them and I passed them. But really my job now is to look at them when a variance comes through, and we look at, if it's a reasonable request, if it changes the character of the area, if it's in harmony of the purpose of the ordinance and consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I really feel like it met all of those. I did reach out to our planner to see how it actually connected to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is very vague. There's nothing specific about, this type of a business. So, I mean, to me, I feel like it meets it, and that's my job to do that. I did listen on the meeting last week. I thought it was a really good discussion. A lot of good points were brought up, and I thought it was worthwhile to bring up those points and to relook at them. So I'm in favor of that also. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just have a couple of comments as well. This is Janet. I'm wondering if the representative from Caribou can answer a question for me. And that is, I think Council Member Logan brings up an interesting point. If it is true that indeed the coffee industry defines a cabin concept as a stand and not a shop, can you speak to that?
I'm not aware of that definition at all. At the December Planning Commission and council meetings, the director of real estate for Caribou Coffee was here and spoke to some of those specifics. The only definitions that Caribou uses and their corporate definitions is their types of stores. They have what's called a chalet now, and they have what's called a cabin. And they don't differentiate with other definitions between them. There's variations on the chalet. Its name has changed a few times, and that's what I'm fully aware of, having developed a chalet and multiple cabins.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm just wondering, I was a little, I mean, this whole process has been frustrating because I think most of the disagreements have been disagreements regarding definitions, whether it's definition of what's masonry or what's definition of a shop versus a stand, or what's definition of neutral colors. There's some lessons to be learned there. So not to say that if we had it to do over again, we might do it differently. Shelley, can you tell me why you think it's not consistent with the comp plan? Because I think I would agree with Council Member Wagaman. I'm struggling to make that connection.
The connection is that we went from defining what a zone was to down to the land use, down to the property specs or the design standards, and it is not consistent with our design standards. It is not consistent with the land use, and so therefore it can't fit into the comp plan.
Is that true, Elizabeth?
I'm not sure that I understand Shelley's thought process, but I think I understand what she's saying. She's saying from the bottom up, it isn't consistent in her mind because from the premise of the zoning district, she doesn't feel it fits, and therefore, by logic, it can't go backwards. So I understand that. If you look, I think from your perspective and Councilmember Wagaman's perspective, I think you're looking at as strictly land use, meaning is it a commercial development? And in that very broad sense, it is a commercial development, but in Shelley's definition, it's not a commercial development because it's a coffee stand, not a coffee shop. And so therefore it doesn't meet criteria. So I think it's really where you sit in your interpretation.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just also want to add some perspective on this. When a city is reviewing whether something is consistent with its code, the fact that it isn't consistent with the city code can be viewed as inconsistency with the comprehensive plan, which requires development to be consistent with the city code. When an applicant comes in and makes a case for a variance and that variance is granted, it is then consistent with the city code by approval of the variance. And so it is a matter of your interpretation as council members, ultimately, whether this is the kind of thing that you envisioned in this district, commercial development, quality commercial development, something of that nature, or not. And obviously you've heard from Councilmember Logan, she does not view it that way, but it is a matter of your judgment as the final decision makers.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, this is Rob. I just state that I'm in favor of it. I'm seeing these pop up all over the Twin Cities. They run a lot of cars through them. They do a lot of business. Shelley, I do agree with you. I would have liked to seen a place with a sit down, right? But who's to say we're not going to get that in the future with possible development of apartments with commercial space on the bottom. Coffee shops typically go in hand with those, so that might still come, but I do like the look of the Caribou brand in Columbus and the look of the building. And I understand needing the variance for the siding because that's the brand. But that's what I got. Thank you.
So would someone like to make the motion for the variance request?
This is Sue. I will, let's see, which one are we
I
on
think we
here?
did already, didn't we? Rob did the first.
Yeah.
You did the second.
Yeah. Oh, so it's, yeah.
This
it's
was
been
the
moved and
discussion.
All right,
So now we can just vote.
someone will
Yes.
call for a vote. Sue?
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Shelley?
Shelley, nay.
Jesse, aye.
Shelley, nay.
Thank you, Shelley. Got it.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. In our enclosure on page 29, we're going to vote on, I think on these 5 issues that the Planning Commission brought up that they would like us to address. No? Straighten me out, Elizabeth.
Mr. Mayor and council members, you have a memo on page 29 from your associate planner, Ben Gubnik. And the Planning Commission identified, after they discussed this application, they identified 5 questions and/or concerns that they felt that they would like to address. As we've only used the ordinance for a very short period of time, this is the area in where we do identify these concerns, because once you apply an ordinance, you start to see, how it should be applied, and maybe some, I won't say inconsistencies, but concerns that you might not have looked at prior to again, because you hadn't had a chance to apply it. So the Planning Commission identified 5 areas, and we think as a staff, we think it's a great idea to look at. What we're asking for is a little bit more time so that we can identify maybe a few more areas that need to be looked at before we actually do an ordinance amendment. So we were asking for 60 more days just to look at the ordinance and apply a few more applications, and then we might have 10 issues, but we just didn't want to keep making amendments. We wanted to put them all together and make one. So what Ben is asking here is, can we have a few more weeks to review a couple more applications, see where we see if we have any other concerns, and then have the Planning Commission work on all of the issues, including the 5 that they have identified.
That's what I was going to say. So I'll make the motion to direct the city staff to continue to review the current chapter 7A, which includes the 5 on page 29, plus whatever else anybody jumps out at them, or anything that jumps out at anybody, through the administration of said ordinance for 90 days to determine if there are additional points to add to the Planning Commission 5 points of concern as outlined on page 29. Is there a second?
This is Janet. I second that, but can I ask, you said 60, this says 90. Which is it?
90, right?
Ben asked for 90, we'll give him 90.
Okay, I second it.
Any other questions or discussion?
This is Shelley.
Go ahead,
This is Shelley. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shelley.
I quite, what, when we say 60 days, or is it 90 now, 90 days? At the end of that 90 days, will we be ready to pass this on into an ordinance?
Elizabeth?
That would be the time that we would start working on it, because we would gather all our concerns, you know, in the next 90 days and put them all together and then start working on the ordinance.
So they'll bring us information and then we'll start discussing. So how long might that take? Another month after that?
You know, we're gathering information as we go along. I mean, these concerns are going to come up and then we'll put them all together. So I don't think it's going to take very long because, I mean, we've already identified 5. We can start working on those. We just wanted to make sure that once we did an amendment that we addressed as much as we could.
Does that answer your question, Shelley?
Yes, but that also makes me feel like I really would like to see it 60 instead of 90.
Well,
I would agree with Shelley. I would love to see it 62 if that's possible.
I think that's fine. You don't need to go into 60.
well, except when I was talking to Ben one day, that's only 2 months. And what if something more, if they become aware of more things in that last 30 days? That was the purpose for that.
But we also know that it's going, I mean, this one to be a never-ending thing. There's going to be, this is never going to end. We will constantly be looking at this and amending it. So I think the purpose for this was just to give it another once-over so that we can try to get, in addition to these 5, any others that need to be researched. I think the 5 that we currently have, there's already been work done on many of them. So I think it's really identifying if there's any other areas that we need to consider when we do the ordinance amendment.
So would you like to make the motion?
You would need to amend your motion, I think.
Yep.
Because you made your motion, so you'll just amend it to say
So
60.
everybody think 60 instead of?
Yep.
All right. So I would like to make a motion to amend my motion that instead of 60 days, it becomes 90 days, or instead of 90 days, it's 60 days.
And this is Janet, I second that amendment.
So let me reread it with the new numbers in it. I would move to direct the city staff to continue to review the current Chapter 7A through administration of said ordinance for 60 days to determine if there are additional points to add to the Planning Commission 5 points of concern as outlined on page 29. Is everybody clear with that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll call for a vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Shelley, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'd like to invite Chairman Ron Hanegraaff to the table. Mr. Mayor and council members, at the last Planning Commission, it was a unanimous vote to nominate Chairman Ron Hanegraaff for another year, and he graciously accepted that year nomination. And now it's up to the council to approve that appointment according to our code.
So would anyone like to make?
Oh, I would love to make that motion. We are so lucky to have him as chair, so thank you so much for agreeing to lead that group for another year. I would move to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve Ron Hanegraaff as the Planning Commission chair.
This is Rob. I'll second that.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
This is Shelley. I just have something to say, and that is that I have never seen a better person handle the people that he has to deal with when they come in and have their requests. He's a great face for Columbus, and I think we're all really happy that he's there. Thank you, Ron.
You're here.
Ditto.
There we go. Oh, call for a vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Jesse, aye.
It's nice to have these masks because you can't see the smiles behind it.
Can't see the
Laughing.
tears. All right, good.
Thank you.
And I'll second that, or third it, or fourth it, or fifth it. We all feel the same way, Ron. Thank you for everything you do for the city and for running a tight ship. So, flip our pages over to number 13, a presentation from the Anoka County Assessment Report. Alex is here, and he'll tell us what he knows. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council member. Can you hear me just fine through the
You can
mask?
take your mask off.
Take it off.
Okay, that's better. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me here tonight. As you know, we all met several different times throughout the last year or so to talk about the assessment proposal that was put forth, I believe, in June. And then we took over the contract in July. And we kind of talked about what that plan was going to look like for the next 2 years after you guys approved the contract. So I'll kind of start tonight here you have a packet in front of you. I also included an additional handout. The additional handout's actually going to be in the Anoka County newsletter that goes out to all residents across the entire county. And I'll get to that a little bit later. Topics for tonight's discussion, I want to outline the plan that we put forth when we were awarded the contract. What happened to values right after we took a look at that, after we did our review, and then after that, what's happened to the 2022 assessment and kind of what you can expect moving forward through this year. So with that, I'll kick it off here. On that second page, you do see our plan for 2021, which was really the 2022 assessed value. Our goal was to view every residential classed parcel as well as every exempt parcel. It was roughly 2,150 parcels, which is a lot of work. And the objective was really aimed at equalizing those parcels, making sure the record is as accurate as possible for each one of those so that everyone's being treated fairly. That helps both Columbus residents as well as the county as a whole when properties are equalized. When you have inequity, it ends up with some people paying more than their fair share at the back end when taxes become calculated. We started in November. It was a little later than we had planned originally. We had staff turnover, a lot of new staff in trainings, which kind of put us back behind. And then it took longer for us to start or to complete the work than we originally thought. It was a lot of work. And I think the staff were a little caught off guard at the amount of changes that they were making. I think you'll see here in the next slide, there's not a whole lot of change. The net gain and the net loss, there wasn't a ton of it. I think in total we added like $7 million of residential value. But in the grand scheme of things, that's 1% or a little over 1% of the Columbus residential value. So the net gain really, as I kind of explained, it's kind of a wash. You have some parcels where value was lost and others where value went up. Others where the data was wrong, but after we fixed the record, you really only saw a very minimal change. But that fixing of the record is going to allow for a more accurate value moving forward. And you can kind of see some of that when I put the equalization comparison there. Study year is the assessment. So 2021 is the 2021 assessment, which would have been something we didn't work on as county staff. We were responsible for overall movement, like I've explained in the past. In that year, we had 45 qualified sales. There were 6 extreme sales. Those extreme sales oftentimes are either where the sales data wasn't verified accurately, meaning you had a vacant land sale that fell within the improved sales study. Basically, an apple in the orange bucket type, if you want to really make it simplified. And then the median is how close, is where we fall as a median. If you array all those sales, that median sale price per statute must be between 90 and 105%. You can see each year Anoka County targets 95 or 94.5 technically, and we aim at that for all of our cities. If you think of a normal bell curve, that's going to keep the majority of parcels near 100% or just under 100%. The big difference there is really when you get to the coefficient of dispersion. That's a statistical measure that measures how tightly correlated those sale prices are around that median. And you can see last year we had a median or a coefficient of 13.42. That's generally high for a city in Anoka County, given the amount of sales that we do have. Countywide, we have 7,000 sales, 6,000 sales in which to do our analysis, which is a benefit. Some outstate counties don't have that luxury. We do. So generally, we see our coefficients of dispersion anywhere from 5 to 10. 10 is very similar to what we would generally see in some of our more outlying communities where you have some unique properties. As I've kind of explained before, when you have a really uniform neighborhood of 50s ramblers, there's thousands of those in the county, and we have thousands of sales of those. Our system is very good at accurately predicting what that value is or estimating what that value is. When you get these unique parcels on 40 acres, that's 2 stories with a full finished area above the ground. They're very unique, and the system is not as good at valuing those, and that's where you can see those coefficients start to climb. So the 9.65, I was very happy to see that when we started doing some of our sales ratio analysis this fall. And then I just put some notes there about the assessment notices. You guys had asked us to send a notice ahead of time before we went and looked at all these parcels. That was very well received throughout the city. I know that residents were very positive about that. They appreciated that. In total, we sent 1,802 letters. We only got like 30 of those back as return to sender. And then from there, in the bottom of that notice, we actually put, please email our office if you wish us not to come to your parcel. And then we kind of outlined what that process is. So we had 16 that had emailed after that notice requesting that we not come to their parcel. I want to say there was 1 or 2 where we got the email while our staff was out in the field that day, where they knocked on the door, and so within a matter of 20 minutes, the email was sent. Our staff person was out in the field where they knocked on the door. So they knocked on the door and then they left, essentially, in those 2 cases. But overall, you'll see those 16 parcels in the meeting minutes when we get to the local board in April. So there's a little different process for those that I can explain at that time. With those assessment notices and with some of our changes, we also stumbled across quite a few parcels where we felt there was clerical errors made, where notes said one thing and then what we saw as a result didn't actually happen. And in those particular cases, when it was at the property owner's benefit, we initiated on behalf abatements for those property owners, so they got money back for current or current plus 2 years. I want to say the largest refund was close to like $11,000 or $12,000 that someone got. Essentially, it was a commercial building that got added to a residential parcel, but it wasn't a big industrial building that was added to that parcel. So we had a couple of those that we did our best to fix, like I said, only to the benefit of the property owner.
So Alex, tell me if I'm in the wrong one. I have them.
No, I'm down. Yep, I just got to that one. So this slide here shows the aggregate values by class. And again, we looked at what would be the res improved and res vacant there, as well as the exempt. It's interesting to note that we saw, in the 2021 would have been the 2021 assessed value. So as of January 2nd, 2021, that's what the overall value total was for that class. Where I put post-quint, that was when I took a snapshot in time in December, very close to when we were done with our assessment, for that year. That would have essentially encapsulated before I made any rate changes based on sales ratio. That's purely what we added to the system from 2021, just through our reviews. So we added almost 16% in exempt value. A lot of that came in Carlos Avery. We had a lot of missing buildings, structures, or in some cases, buildings that had been torn down a couple years ago and new ones built where there's just inequities. And the exempt assessment happens at once every 6 years. So that's not that uncommon, but I was a little surprised to see a value increase of 16%. That number, while it doesn't impact taxes or levy rates or anything like that. It does impact the way the state calculates fire aid. Exempt value is included when they go to determine fire aid. Whether this, this building doesn't pay taxes, but the fire department still has to put it out. So if it goes up in flames. So that type of stuff does matter. We always want to make sure we have accurate values on the exempt values. Getting down further, the reason the residential vacant looks kind of odd there as going down is we had December's when we're busy doing our property splits and combines. So some of the parcels might have been temporarily unavailable when I ran those queries. That's why it would have looked like you dropped a lot there, as well as some of that res vacant land was now getting turned into res improved land through the property splits potentially. So that's, the bulk of our work was really in that residential improved area. So that's where you can see we added 1.26% in value in our, and it's roughly $7 million that we added to that role. Moving forward, looking at the 2022 assessment, most people are aware of what was happening in the market over the last 15 months. It was insane what some of the prices were, and that was across the entire county. So some of those increases there where you're seeing by property type, we're pretty much done with residential changes, so that numbers, these aren't final numbers yet. We still have to make some commercial changes as well as some ag land changes. So you're going to see those two property types change slightly for compared to final numbers. But that residential improved residential value, that's right within the ballpark of what all the other cities are seeing in terms of increases across the board. Our values are up anywhere from 15 to 25%. The bulk of that increase is in the lower end of the property market range, anywhere from 2 to, in the low end, it's kind of weird to say, the low end now is up to 400,000, in some of those cases. Those are where you're seeing larger increases on the higher side of that average, whereas some of your high end stuff is a little bit lower, but still positive. And that's really where we're trying to be proactive at the county level in notifying property owners that values are going up. That doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going to go up the same amount. It could, depending on what levies do. But if all things were held equal and values doubled, your tax rate's just going to drop and you're going to pay the same amount in taxes. So that's where that article that like I said, it's just a draft form at this point in time. That tries to outline in very simple forms what happens when values go up and what can ultimately happen to the levy if there are no changes. It's one of the better options that we have. Again, this is going to go out to all Anoka County residents in mid-March. Our value notices happen to go out mid-March as well. So property owners should get the newsletter, and then they should get their value notice. We're also going to be publishing additional information on our website that talks about the trends that happen and the trends that are applied to the sale prices that we use to determine values. The biggest question I think we're going to get this year is, I bought my house in June of 2021 for $380,000. Now I received an assessment for January 2nd of 2022. That's $390,000 or $410,000. How can that be possible? And that's really, I think, an additional item that we're going to put on our website that will help explain that process. Values are moving that fast. It's not unheard of for some properties that get listed and sold within a matter of hours or even before sold with 20, 30 offers before it's ever hit the market. So we're always following the market, but it is something that we're going to have to deal with and try to explain to property owners so that it makes sense. The good piece is we still have all the review methods that we always have had in the informal appeal options. That's kind of where I get to some of the next steps, or what to expect next. Like I said, we have this article, an additional one going on our website. Each council and city administrator group within the county, so all of our 21 jurisdictions, are also going to get an addition, like an information packet from us, kind of explaining what's happened to values. But that'll be before March. We're hoping that's going to be probably right at the beginning of March. That's going to explain what happened to values over from 21 to 22, why you are exceeding these, because before they call us, oftentimes they might reach out to you and say, how is my value doing this? So we want you guys to have that information as well. So we're working on packaging that up for you guys early March so that you can consume that ahead of when notices and stuff go out. Then we'll have your local board meeting on April 28th, 2022 this year. Myself and Diana Stelmach, the chief deputy, will be at that meeting along with maybe a staff member or two. We'll have a good idea as to how many people we can expect at that meeting after notices go out in March. We do have a pretty good system of tracking phone calls within the system, so I'll have some data for the local board book at that point saying this is how many calls we received, this is how many values we've adjusted before that local board meeting, and this is how many parcels have been appealed or that we expect to come. There might be some that we don't expect, but we'll have some of that data that we can track for you at that point. I do have additional information. I didn't want to make it too long because I know assessment's pretty boring, but I can share lists of like percent change lists by parcel, if the county's interested in looking at something like that, or if the city's interested in looking at anything like that. I have a list, the list of the denials. I can also put together custom reports based on that information if you'd like as well. You guys have any questions or feedback about what we did this year and what to expect?
Anyone?
I don't think so. This is Janet. So first of all, congratulations on getting through doing all of those parcels and it feels good that we finally got the records straight. I know you said that a fair number of the parcels you had to do clerical. Do you have a sense of what percent? Like how many changed?
The abatement, we didn't do a lot of the abatement stuff because statute only allows us to do abatements when there's a clerical error. And clerical is pretty clerical. It was where we saw a note that said, basement unfinished, yet the appraiser left the basement on for years.
Yep.
So those types of things. I want to say we only did maybe less than 10 abatements overall. And some of those were multi-year. We did try to fix, and what we don't classify as an abatement is also current year fixes, where anything before December 1st, we had within our ability as assessors to make the change, and it's not called an abatement. So we made a lot of those changes as well, where we fixed the 2021 value, and we never fixed that value to the property owner's detriment. If it was going to impact the property owner to where their taxes would have gone up beyond what the notice would have indicated in March, we didn't proceed with that. We only did if it was a benefit to the property owner. And I don't have exact numbers. I can try to get numbers though for you.
Just ballpark, I'm just curious, because I know that our sense was that the records really had gotten out of date, and I was just curious whether that played out when you did your edits.
We made a lot of 2021 changes. Like I said, I can try to get the number for those. For the 2022 assessment, I would guess that over 75% of the parcels had fairly significant changes. Probably the top three issues that I know that I heard from the staff were missing buildings or additions. And that's missing and or changed. Buildings that have been gone for 5 to 10 years that were still on the record, so that we removed them, or buildings that have been there clearly for 5 or 10 years that we've never had on the record. So a lot of that type of stuff was probably number one. The second was styles of home that didn't line up with our county standard. It's a 2-story home. We had it out there as a 1-story, so we were only valuing 1 floor of that home. We saw a lot of that, as well as some effective age changes. Effective age being our determination of a condition at that point in time. Has it received normal maintenance? Is the roof past its normal use or normal life? That type of thing. We have a schedule that we follow at the county, and we provide that to all staff working in Anoka County to try and adhere to make sure that we're being consistent. We made a lot of changes effective age-wise on probably every home, whether that be on adding years to that or reducing the number of years. that are there. So those are probably the top three.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember?
Yeah, this is Rob. So what, on the 16 denials of access requests, what happens if they were denied access to the property? Do you just do like an aerial guess at it, or?
Yep. So when property owners deny us access to the properties, we have to use the best, that doesn't mean we don't appraise it. We still have to do the best we can with the information we have. So currently we have a pictometry or aerial imagery vendor called Pictometry. They fly flights once every 2 years currently. I think the most recent flight was 2020, so it's a little dated. It's pretty good though, and that goes back 15, well, back to 2006. So it goes back a ways, and we have the ability to kind of see changes throughout that time. We use that information. We try to use building permit information. We did work with Elizabeth to get a lot of permit data put into the system for Columbus, so we had some of that background history. Although otherwise, yeah, it's existing records. So again, we do the best we can. We do put a denial on the record. That's noting that the property owner didn't allow us in. So when you get that list at local board time, if those property owners want to appeal their value, the only way you can make a change on that property is if they let us come to take a look at the property.
It's gonna be my next question.
Yep. So if they still have the ability to appeal it, it's just you would have to tell them you denied entry on this date. And we kept track of those, on a spreadsheet with dates and stuff. We'd say, you denied entry at this point. Once you let the assessor come out, take a look at it. If they have a revised value, they'll bring it back, and then you guys would vote on that value at that point in time. If they say no, I still don't want the assessor on my property, which they have every right to do, you guys wouldn't be able to make any change at that point in time, and it would go to the County Board of Appeal and Equalization. And the county board would have the same issue there. So.
Chris, go ahead.
I'll speak into here, even though I can't see you. If you would have called to have us come out, we weren't doing any interior inspections due to COVID, our COVID protocols. But we should have returned your call to come out and take a look at the property. You wouldn't have shown up as a denial in that particular case. We would have likely hung a yellow door tag on your door that said assessor was here, exterior view or something like that, just to let you know. Our staff were taking front-facing photos of each property. When appropriate, if there's kids or animals or people in the pictures, they didn't take it. If there's garage doors that were open, I told them not to take those either, recognizing that if we ever make those images public, I don't want it to look like, I don't want people seeing that you have a boat in your garage or something like that. So no, that you would not be treated as a denial.
Because I did get the yellow tag on my door, and it told me to call.
Okay.
And I called, but I never got any response, and I called like 3 times. So I just want to make sure that I'm
Sure.
not a denial.
Nope, you wouldn't be, and I can certainly take your phone number here, and I can take a look at it and give you a call tomorrow if you'd like. And I can certainly send someone out now even. We have the ability to make changes now. So if there were something wrong or something that we didn't see, that we couldn't see from the outside, we can certainly make that change now.
But if it's not gaining entry to the property, I mean, to the house, so you just look at the outside.
Yep, we're looking at the outside. And a lot of the stuff we can kind of tell from the outside too. Sometimes you get a good idea when you're on the outside of a home what the inside might look like, especially if you've done it for a period of time. You can kind of see, there's some tricks to the trade to see what might be there. Any other questions?
Anybody?
No, I just want to.
This is Shelley.
Go ahead, Shelley.
I just wanted to know if there were any notations made on properties with outbuildings as to whether they were under commercial or not jurisdiction.
Yep. We kept track of that information. We actually removed a number of commercial segments that were out there where the segment might have been out there, and a lot of them were small. and not a lot of value. So it wasn't a huge impact. And I kind of explained that in some of our work session meetings where it's a really small value. There's really not a lot of tax impact there. Some of those might have been on the record for 5 to 10 years, but it's changed hands 3 or 4 times since the person that had the commercial segment was there, so we took those off when we could. And then in certain situations, we added a commercial segment as well. The biggest one was that abatement that I was talking about, where the commercial segment was added in like 2006, in the amount of almost $500,000 building added to the record. But it was a residential pole building. It wasn't a big commercial storage warehouse or industrial. I think it was an industrial warehouse building that was added to the record. So the appraiser had added a commercial type building to this residential parcel that created just an enormous value that was not warranted, because we still have to value at highest and best use, and it was just a pole frame detached garage. So highest and best use, there's probably only $50,000-$60,000 of value that's there instead of $500,000. So we did what we could through statute to do current +2 in those cases. I can do my best to inquire against the notes and give you a list of parcels where we may have added new commercial segments to parcels, if the council's interested in that.
I was just going to say that I know what Chris is talking about with the little tag, because I had one on mine too, which was the first time I've had one for, I can't even remember, I think at least 15 years. So that was really great. But I think take a look on the wording on it, because it does tell you to call. And I think I've heard that from several people that confused them.
Yep, we've heard that feedback, and we've used that tag it's not changed since my time at Anoka County. I do want to change the language on there, and I want to make a couple different check boxes on there as well, noting whether or not they need to call us back, whether exterior review is sufficient or not. But yes, I do see where the confusion could be.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Elizabeth, anything from you?
I got one more. So how do you go about valuing something, say that something was under construction, like an addition was going on or something like that? Is it a partial of what the addition is, or the permit, or?
Yep, so we always value as of January 2nd. So if the home was 50% complete, we always try to, that gets to a different time frame. Quintile is really generally done in the summer, not November, December. So we were picking up a lot of the permit-related work as we were doing our quintile this year, which is a little different. But anything that was in process, we went back and saw again, or we did a drive-by review in January to take a look to say, okay, what do I think the percent complete was on this? And then we value it as such. So if it's a $300,000 building and it's 50% complete, it get $150,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then they'll likely see us again next year. So in some of those cases, we also hang door tags saying we're out there working on permit work. So they'll see us multiple years in a row, especially if something takes 5 years to do.
Sure.
Anybody else? No? All right, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
So what does Chris have to do? Call in again?
I'll get her address here right now.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming out tonight. So let's move on to number 14, the 2022 recycling events. That's on page 14 of our packet. Each year, the city hosts multiple opportunities for residents to participate in citywide recycling events. This is on page 14. In the spring, April 27th, 30th, and 30th, bicycle drop-off with 2 coupons, free paper shedding. In the summer, on July 15th, we'll have a curbside pickup. In the fall, we have a bicycle drop-off, household hazardous waste drop-off with 2 coupons, a fix-it clinic, and a paper shredding. And look at number 4. Throughout the year, we offer on-site sort recycling and organic collection for the residents and provide the compostable bags to be used for this program. Anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
I have nothing to add to that. My only question to the council is if you think that you want other events or you have other suggestions. I know Lori's always looking for new ideas. So if you come across something in other communities or you think that there's some good ads to the recycling program, I would say just give her a call or quick email, because sometimes it is really hard to think of new ideas when it comes to recycling.
Thank you. So I'll make the motion to approve the 2022 recycling events as listed. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Any other discussion or questions? I'll call for the vote.
Sue, I.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Shelley, I.
Jesse, aye. Number 15 is the Coon Creek Watershed District appointments, and that's pages 15 through 18. So this just tells us that there's a vacancy on the Coon Creek Watershed District. And how long do we have, or what do we have to do, Elizabeth?
So it appears that we have been getting these a lot with the vacancies. I think this is the second or third time for watershed districts that we've had vacancies. Last year, I think we just sent out the information to the addresses that we had in Coon Creek, just letting them know that there was a vacancy. And if you think that's appropriate, we still have that mailing list, and we can use it again and indicate to them exactly the notice that you see before you. And I believe the Anoka County, their new process is that if someone is interested, they submit the application and they are interviewed, and then they select from a list. We've never gotten a list of 3, but certainly if we do get a list of 3, we can bring it back to the council.
All right. So I'll make the motion to send information to residents in the Coon Creek Watershed Districts of the current vacancy. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Is there any questions or discussion?
This is Shelley. How many are we going to send out approximately?
You know, Shelley, I want to say it was like 45 letters.
Okay, fine.
I'll call for the vote.
Sue, I.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Shelley, I.
Yes, yeah. Letter D, engineer report. Kevin, I see you're on the Google. What do you have for us?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Kevin Bittner, City Engineer. It seems like just a day ago we were talking about this topic. Last night when we left our workshop, the last thing we were discussing is a recommendation that I had made in regards to doing a more detailed feasibility study of options for location of the cul-de-sac at the end of 182nd Lane. Subsequent to that discussion over the course of today, Jim Windingstead and I have been discussing options for the cul-de-sac. To review a little bit, when we design a new cul-de-sac in a subdivision where we've got bare ground and lots of area to work with, our typical standard is a 100-foot diameter driving circle within a 120-foot right-of-way or easement diameter. In this particular situation, we have a easement that was platted of 120 feet when the subdivision was put together. As we know from our discussions, the construction of the turnaround or even a hammerhead was never completed, so we're dealing with this topic today. But in any event, as Jim and I talked about it, since we don't have bare property to place the cul-de-sac, we've got property owners that have been occupying the property that the easement sits on probably for the last 40 years and have developed their yards and landscaping and whatnot over those years. What could we potentially accommodate that would still meet the essential requirements of a turnaround? And we believe that after our discussion that probably an 80 to 90 foot diameter turnaround would be adequate in this type of application where we don't have a lot of room to work with. And so I laid out a couple different options this afternoon for 80 and 90 foot diameter turnarounds. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you have those to display or if those are being shared with the council.
Kevin, the city council has additions and they have the diagrams in their packet on pages 12 and 13, and I'm just now trying to bring them up on the overhead.
So you have a couple different options in addition to what we looked at last night. One's an 80 diameter, 80 foot diameter turnaround, and the other one's a 90 diameter turnaround. All of it situated within our current 120 foot easement, but shifted easterly, so that's not totally centered within the existing easement, but displaced in order to minimize the impact to those abutting property owners on the north and the south. And if you look at the 80 foot option, and that's the one Jim and I have believe that we can work with and would be satisfactory in this application. It does significantly reduce the amount of impact to the neighboring properties. And if you look at the diagram, you know, the orange circle would be essentially the driving surface of the turnaround, and the black circle is essentially the clearing area that we would want to clear the trees, so that we have about essentially a 10-foot boulevard around the driving surface in order for maintenance activities to occur, snow plowing, snow storage, that kind of thing. I did run kind of a little better estimate, cost estimate on this particular option, and I think Elizabeth did a real good job of with her estimate on option 3, because I came up with pretty much around $40,000 to construct, and that's all in construction, engineering, surveying, and the like to construct this option. And so based on this evaluation, I would tend to my recommendation would be to move forward on this option, and maybe Jim can also contribute to if he's got any other thoughts or things that I missed in my discussion here.
No, that was well said. You know, you and I did talk about this quite a bit today, and I think that this is our best option. We did the 2 circles, 80 and 90 feet. I don't want to, I want to say our intention is to try to keep it to 80 feet, but if we run into some glitches, you know, that's, we're going with approximate, as Kevin said, 80 to 90 feet. But if you look at that circle in comparison to the 120 foot easement, that's considerably less evasive to the 2 property owners, and that is definitely going to be our recommendation tonight, to try to achieve that.
So this is Sue. I have a question. And I thought about this after I re-looked at the maps that we looked at last night, and trying to understand what the original was, the hammerhead, and the easement was for the hammerhead. And I was trying to figure out how much extra property this is taking, the cul-de-sac, than what the hammerhead. So I was trying to figure out if that black line, was that the easement line before for the hammerhead?
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I actually have last night's paperwork here too. The orange line is the easement today. That's what our easement is. The black line is the extra clearing diameter. So we have, so when you build a cul-de-sac or a road like that, you're gonna have some slopes down. And that's the clearing, we'll call it storage, maintenance area. So we would mow that, we would maintain that, keep the brush and debris cleared from that area.
Okay, but how about the straight line? The straight line that's, on,
To the east?
yeah,
So I think, Jim, I think Sue's question is the hammerhead, and I do believe that if we kind of draw it out, the hammerhead is parallel and then it goes south, from the original hammerhead, you know what I mean, that was drawn in, and that's where we don't have the easement.
so what I was trying to understand is how much more impact is this on the property owner with the cul-de-sac than with the hammerhead? So say they bought their house however many years ago, it was on the record that it was a hammerhead that could go in, wasn't in, but could go, and it would be at that line right there. But now that changed, and we can't do a hammerhead anymore, we have to do a cul-de-sac. So, but the cul-de-sac is round, and it's going further into his property. So is it going further into his property than it would have if it was the hammerhead?
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So you're asking if we did a hammerhead, would it be less evasive? Is
Yep.
that what you're asking me?
Or are you talking about what the original plan, the
Yeah,
very first
the original plan and what the homeowner understood, that if, when they bought the property, it was a hammerhead. And
Mr. Mayor and City Council, this is Bill Griffith. I think I understand the question, so if I can try and address the answer.
Go for it, Bill.
So the two owners that would be affected by this cul-de-sac, they bought their property subject to an easement that would be a round cul-de-sac, not a hammerhead. The hammerhead was on the property to the east, and those properties developed at a different time with the hammerhead. And so the property owners who are affected by this project have always had of record legally an easement on their property for a cul-de-sac, not a hammerhead. I hope that addresses the question.
yes, thank you.
This is Rob. So previous to this, were the plow trucks or any delivery trucks turning around on the 5317 and the 5348 and maintaining that?
We have maintained that hammerhead ever since I've worked here, and 30, 40 years prior to that. I'm just,
So since I mean, this might not be very popular, but since we've maintained that, isn't that technically the city's property now?
Bill, I think you can take this one and it's explained as traveled. I know there's some
Right.
controversy about the easement and such.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council members, the statute gives the city the right to, the underlying right to the property that it's maintained for roadway purposes. I think the challenge here is, as you look at that aerial, is, kind of discovering what's been maintained and what those limits are, and then trying to reconstruct a hammerhead that would work within that property. We also have had, significant pushback by the property owner as to, what those rights mean. And that's why the focus has been on moving to the west, where there are clear rights of record that have existed since the time that those properties were platted. So yes, we could legally, under the statute, sometimes called statutory user, we could improve that hammerhead, but we'd have to be very careful to work within the area that's clearly maintained. And again, we would likely get a challenge from the property owner because there has been a long discussion over underlying title and what's there and what's not there.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I just wanted to bring it up because I'm guessing maybe the landowners to the west there were thinking it as well, possibly. One other question then, the southerly property 5252, does this now affect their 70-foot setback off the road? Because now that cul-de-sac encroaches very close to their house? No.
Bill, I think this is the after the fact, I believe, until it's improved. We don't take setbacks from easements, we do it from improved easements. So in this particular case, well, it would, if it was legal non-conforming when it was built, or legal conforming when it was built, even after the cul-de-sac, it would be legal non-conforming, but it would still stand.
Yes, and it would also be the property owner's election to come in and request a variance, which, because that change is not of their making, it would be a relatively easy variance to approve. I won't say how the planning commission and the council would act on it, but that would be a reasonable request by a property owner affected by a road project. So they could either have a legal non-conforming property, or they could make it legally conforming through a variance.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
So last night, when we had discussion on this, there was a request to give the landowners a couple of weeks to talk about this amongst themselves. Is that still the request we're acting on, or is the recommendation to move forward with this without providing that 2 weeks that they asked for?
Mr. Mayor and Council, you can certainly give the 2 weeks if that is what you would like to give to the Stroms. I think I forwarded you all the email that we received today, and so we have at least one unwilling property owner to dedicate easement on a voluntary basis. And so in light of that email to all of you, we went ahead and did a little bit more research, understanding that if you want to give the 2 weeks, otherwise we would gain the 2 weeks and move forward with a scenario that we felt would be appropriate. But certainly either way would work, and we can contact the Stroms. I thought they were going to tune in tonight. They asked about the Zoom information, but we can certainly take the time to explain to them what we've come up with.
Well, this is Sue. I would feel uncomfortable not giving them the 2 weeks when we told them we would last night, face to face, and then go back on our word and say, oh, sorry, we just passed this. I don't think, and tell me if I'm wrong, is 2 weeks gonna impact the project? Because you can't really start on construction until spring anyway, right?
2 weeks will not impact this project.
Okay, then I think we give them the 2 weeks.
So clarification for me then, and I'm gonna assume Kevin's thinking the same thing. So we give them 2 weeks, do we just give them 2 weeks? Or do you want us to do anything with the project at this point? And when I say anything, like hypothetically move forward and do some of the staking, I'm gonna say staking, meaning painting those circles out there, or doing the surveys as we talked about last night on potentially both of those properties, or nothing.
Can you make the orange painted circle without a lot of surveying and things like that? I think that was a concern of theirs, that they wanted to at least see.
This is Kevin. We would need a survey crew to basically locate the property corners in order to, properly find out where we are within the right of way and the properties. It would not be as extensive of an effort as we previously discussed in terms of surveying those 4 quadrants for a more detailed feasibility study. But we could do enough just to mark the circle. Basically, what we would probably do is mark the orange circle, which would be the actual driving surface, and then the black circle, which would be the clearing limits.
Kevin, this is Janet. Were you able to get a sense of how soon you might be able to get a survey scheduled?
Next week.
Oh, yay. I think we should move forward with that. and have it drawn out so that the property owners can see what you're proposing now. And I think that will clear up a lot of questions. And I agree with Council Member Wagaman that, do that next week. The following week is 2 weeks, and then everybody should be informed and feeling good about moving forward.
This is Kevin again. Just so we're aware too that when we do go out and mark that, we're probably going to have to paint it. Like I indicated last night, we're not going to be able to drive stakes or do anything like that very easily. We could drive them in the snow, certainly, but we'll use paint marks, which will be as good as long as the snow doesn't melt.
And then we'll communicate to the landowners when that's going to happen, so they can take a look. Great, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for being creative and trying to come up with, an option that minimally impacts, or I should minimizes the impact to the property owners. That's much appreciated.
Would someone like to make the motion?
So let me look at this. So this is Janet. So I would move to direct the city engineer to complete the study. Or maybe, is it the study or the survey or the whole thing? Study and survey for option number 3?
Can I ask a question before you do that?
Sure.
And maybe Kevin's gonna try to answer it, but if you go out, Kevin, and mark that center, would you have to go survey again later?
Yes.
So is that a cost of twice for the project?
Kevin can answer that one, but.
Well, we'd be mobilizing twice, so it wouldn't be quite as efficient. But I think when we discussed last night, we were going to do both. We were going to mark the circle as we had it laid out under option 3, and then do the survey. So that would be at least a day, if not a day and a half's worth of work for our survey crew. What we're talking about right now is, maybe just a few hours worth, maybe half a day's worth. So it certainly cuts the initial scope considerably. But if this is the route that we would go, obviously we would need the 2 weeks, making sure that everybody understands the scope of the project. But we wouldn't want to expend any additional resources until we know this is the route we're going to go. So it would be a slight additional cost, but I think it all would fit within the budget that we're talking about. As I indicated, at 40,000 all in is what I'm estimating right now.
Thank you, Kevin.
And to Janet, to the motion, I would recommend that the motion be authorizing the city engineer to conduct a survey to mark the approximate limits of the cul-de-sac as currently proposed under this 80-foot option.
Okay. So this is Janet. So I would move to direct the city engineer to conduct a survey to mark the approximate limits of the 80 and 90-foot option, and to include the cost of construction for the 182nd lane cul-de-sac.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion or any questions?
This is Shelley. I have a question.
Go ahead.
The original bid, or the original amount that was estimated, was 38 plus. And then we added on I don't remember, 5,000 or something at one point. And now you're coming and saying it's going to be 40,000, and yet the circle is smaller. There's going to be less trees that have to be cut down. Is there a reason why the price doesn't go down?
Understand we're just dealing with estimates at this point. The actual cost is likely going to be something different than this number, depending on what we get for final bid. And I can't guarantee that the construction costs won't be higher than what I estimate. I mean, that's just the challenges of doing estimates for construction. but I did try to be conservative in my estimate. So basically, I tried to estimate high, so that's probably why I'm a little bit higher than the estimate that was provided yesterday.
So Kevin, this is Janet. I mean, what I was understanding is that this option is probably going to fall in line, maybe a little less, maybe a little more than what our option was that we were considering last night. There was probably, depending on what the contingencies are. So I guess I took you to basically tell us that we're not looking at something significantly more expensive and less impact to the landowners. So in my opinion, definitely worth looking at. And you'll come back with a better estimate after the survey, I'm assuming, correct?
Well, once we do a survey of the property, okay, so we'll go out and mark the circle. We determine that the property owners have the opportunity to evaluate this 2 weeks from now. The council decides to move forward with this option. We would then do a more detailed survey so that we can put together a plan that we can go out for quotations with some contractors. After putting the plan together based on detailed survey, I can update our estimate because it'll be based on more detailed information. So probably if this continues to move forward, probably within another 6 weeks, I would likely have a more detailed estimate to compare to.
And then my question for Elizabeth is last night, we talked about needing a motion to continue this for 2 weeks. We still need that motion?
I don't think so. I think we just needed direction as to, last night we talked about study doing 2 options. We so I think there were some moving parts here. So I think even the motion was moving parts till late afternoon. So I think what's laid out now is a good direction to give you more information and feedback. And also the landowners, because I do agree with Sue. We promised that we would show the landowners how it was going to impact their property, and this will show that, so that they can make I won't say a decision, but they can at least in their mind see where it's going to go and how will it impact their property. It also give us an opportunity to at least speak to them on a one-on-one so that they can truly understand, what happened between last night and today.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? We'll call for the vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Shelley, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
I have no other report, Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks for all the new information. And the 80-foot certainly seems like a lot less intrusive than the 120. So it's a step in the right direction, I believe. All right, City Attorney's Report, number 17.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, just one item. I wanted to let you know, in case you're knocking around City Hall tomorrow, there will be a commissioner's hearing. This relates to the Southwest Sewer Project, and it's essentially been a long time coming since that project has been completed now for quite a while. This relates to the Swanson Cleary property. The city acquired, through eminent domain condemnation, acquired a small portion of property that was needed, I think, for a lift station. And it's part of the sewer project. And the property owners disagreed with the offer that was made at that time. And so they have the right to avail themselves of the commissioner's process. And generally, the hearing involves a real estate attorney, an assessor, and one other real estate, an appraiser, an assessor, and a real estate broker typically. And if you've been through this process, they hear testimony only on value, not on the project, not whether the project should have been constructed, but just on the value of that real estate. We have a difference in opinion still on that value. The city made efforts to settle this matter ahead of the hearings to save the cost of the hearings, but that was rejected by the landowners. So in a couple weeks' time, we should have the ultimate finding on value by the commissioners, and at that time, we will also then know the full cost of the project, and we will add that to the assessment. So the other thing that's been kind of held up in this process is assessing that project to the benefited parties. We'll be able to do that. Now, I would also indicate that the property owners, if they don't like what the commissioners come up with, they can appeal that decision to district court. So this is how these things go. Sometimes they take a long time to get settled out, but we are interested in making an assessment of this project on those properties that were benefited by it.
And so you're saying, don't come up here and knock around tomorrow?
I'm saying if you happen to see a lot of cars in the parking lot, I just wanted to give you a heads up what's going on. And I also wanted to, Elizabeth asked me to update the council on that Southwest Sewer project. So that's the update. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions, anyone? All right, nothing here.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Number 18, City Council Members Report. Sue.
This is Sue, no report.
Rob, no report.
This is Janet. Do we want to update on our meeting with Bobby Benson on the internet thing?
If you'd like to update them,
Pardon?
I said if you'd like to update them, I think we can talk about the broadband project.
So just very briefly, I think I'd mentioned that we were scheduled to meet with Congressman Emmer's Minnesota staffer. His name is Robert Benson. He goes by Bobby. Everybody calls him Bobby. It's not because we're very familiar with him. That's just his preferred first name. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to reach out to him knowing that the infrastructure bill, or the federal infrastructure bill had been passed and that there was 42.5 billion, as in B, dedicated towards expanding broadband infrastructure. And our question was, is there a way that we could work with Congressman Emmer's office or other representatives to direct some of that funding to cities like us that have got projects and definitions and things like that. So it was a good first meeting. He was very kind to come and spend an hour or more with us. He took back some questions, which he will follow up with us on. He suggested that there also be an attempt, or I shouldn't say attempt, but that we also reach out to Senator Klobuchar and Tina Smith's office as well. They work very collaboratively, and he thought those two offices could be helpful too. So nothing really to report definitely, other than we had the meeting. He definitely understood what our predicament was and was sympathetic towards it, and was going to follow up with their DC office and then get back to us with the answers to our questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Shelley, do you have anything?
Nothing, thank you.
And I have nothing either. Public Works. Joe?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to give you a little update on my ARPA money spending. ARPA stands for American Rescue Plan Act. That's the money that we're using for the broadband project, and Elizabeth and I wanted to snag some of that money for a couple projects that we had. So Elizabeth and I have met a couple of times on this, and I had four projects that I was looking at. Two of those were for sewer and two were for water. And of course, the amount of money that my projects would have sucked up the whole ARPA fund, and we're sharing that. So the two projects that I picked is we have a well number 3 for us, which is our highest producing well that has been pumping sand for the last year. So we run it, but at a very low rate of speed, so it doesn't draw that sand from the bottom of the well. So the rehab basically consists of they pull the motor, they pull the pump, and there's, I won't bore you with all the details, but they basically vacuum out all the sand. They airlift it out and recreate a cavern underground that is solid, and all of that sand comes out of there, and then they reinstall new parts if necessary. Otherwise, the parts that are in there, they just put back in. That project is roughly around $100,000. The other project is a generator at Lift Station 4. I picked that lift station because that is where the Love's Travel Center is going. It's not a very large lift station for capacity wise, which it's not a downfall. It just means that it runs more often, which is actually good for it because it just keeps cycling and things don't build in there. My concerns would be that if we've lost power, we only have one portable generator for 5 lift stations and a well house. So that kind of has to bounce around between different things, and the likelihood that you could end up with a sewer backup would be pretty large. That lift station would not only at this point covers Love's Travel Center, but also North Hornsby and the little development on 152nd and Feller, plus West Freeway Drive from Muddy Paws north, any development that would come in on our new road that we're talking about, West Freeway Drive to the north, and everything on Lake Drive. So there's a fair amount of flow that goes through there. So the likelihood that we could have problems in the future would be pretty big if we don't install a lift station or a lift station generator. So those are the two that I picked, and the reason why I picked those. The other two projects that I hope to try to do in the what I'll call somewhat near future is a well rehab on the first well that we put in. That one's not nearly as extensive. That's probably in that $25,000 range. But the other sewer one would be lift station 1, which is our main lift. That has a fair amount of capacity, but we're using that. They call the capacity as detention time. How long does it take to fill up before a pump has to run? That lift station is actually it's pretty large, and that generator would be I don't remember off the top of my head, somewhere around $55,000. So quite a bit more money. Actually, I could be wrong on that. No, it's about 55,000. So I just wanted to give you a little update on where I was at. I'm going to be talking to these contractors in the next couple of days to get them started on their projects. The well rehab potentially would start in the next couple of weeks, and that's probably a 3-4 week project. And the generator is if I remember right, 33-week lead time on a generator. So, I mean, it takes a bit of time, so we won't be seeing that till late September probably. So,
How much is the how much is the generator for lift station 4?
somewhere between 35 and 40,000. I know I'm giving you a ballpark number, but there's some things that I estimated some cost. So the generator itself is a pretty fixed number, but I have to try to figure out the location that I'm going to set it. And this area is pretty tight because there's a big power panel there, and we have some water gate valves and stuff that are relatively close to that. So the further away I have to go with it, the more cost, because you got to run wires and different things like that. And then I also have to have Connexus drop a natural gas meter there. So the further away I go, I mean, there's some nuances. So I kind of guessed at those prices. I know I'm pretty close, but so I think I have $38,000 wrote here, but I think that's going to be very close.
And there's enough money for what we've already dedicated to broadband plus this, plus you had some IT stuff, if I recall.
Well, so all 4 of Jim's projects would have way exceeded, you know what I mean, the dollar figure, so that's why we pared it down to 2. And that left me with 15,000 to look at IT projects, and that will, so if you look at the $300,000 for the broadband, you look at Jim's 2 projects, and then the IT for cybersecurity and some other things, that takes care of the entire amount of the ARPA dollars that we were allotted.
So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, that is the end of my report.
This is Shelley. I have a question. I don't know anything about wells, and you're saying that this sand that's getting pumped needs to be fixed. And knowing the nature of sand, is it going to fill up again in a number of years, and then this will have to happen again, where we take and make room for the water, I guess?
So I don't have that answer, but I'm going to say the likelihood is yes. And the reason.
Okay, so if that's the case, I'm kind of concerned because I don't understand timeline, and I'm thinking, do we need another capital fund? You know, just like we have for the roads. If this thing's gonna keep filling up with sand.
Well, I'll give you a little history without boring everyone. I could talk about water for hours, but I know that not everybody's that excited about it as I am. Our system is completely different than most people's. So if you drive around other communities, they all have water towers. We do not have a water tower. So one of the best things for a well to do is to turn on and pump water and just keep pumping very consistently. Ours does not do that. So ours will turn on to satisfy a demand. A demand could be a water truck, it could be somebody turning on a fire hydrant somewhere, it could be anything like that. The hard part about a well cycling like that is it turns on, it starts drawing water really fast, and then somebody shuts the fire hydrant and it stops. And that creates what they call water hammer. So the water 400 feet down in the ground all of a sudden is rushing into that well, and that well stops. So then it slams backwards and it creates, they call it water hammer. So it basically starts to erode away and break that soil away in the ground, or the sandstone or limestone or whatever it happens to be down at the bottom. And it just creates a bad turbulence underground, where if you hypothetically had a water tower, it would turn on and it would run for 6 hours to fill a water tower. It just flows the water that one direction. You slow down the ramp feed on it so it slows down at a slow rate of speed, and you don't end up with that water hammer. So the likelihood that you end up air vacuuming out your well on a regular basis is pretty slim in most cases. Does that make sense?
It does. It scares me though, because it's like the ARPA funds are pulling our bacon out of the fire right now. But unless we start something like a fund for a water tower, or a fund, I mean, at one time, I don't remember, I thought we talked and you said something about water towers like $1 million. And, you know, ours is kind of a big chunk down payment on something like a water tower. And is that where we should be going?
So the downside of our community, as I say, it's a great community, but our sewer water district is very small, and it is not populated that much at the moment. So our system was designed for a high capacity commercial use, and when we put it in that 2005, 2007 time, the market crashed and nobody built anything, so we have this really nice system and no users. So no users on a system is not necessarily doing us any favors either. So we have all sorts of inherent difficulties with how our system is set up at the moment. But when we talk about apartment complexes and a Love's Travel Center and, you know,
Adding the hotel.
hotels, all of those things are very beneficial to us. It's premature to talk about a water tower because our water supply usage is not very big. So from the start of our system, you have to get a permit from the DNR. It's called the Water Appropriation Permit. Our permit was for 20 million gallons of water. Might sound like a lot of water, but I'm going to assume that the city of Minneapolis probably loses that much water every day and has no idea where it goes. That's the maximum number that we could pump for a year. So I just increased that to 30 million through that permitting process because we were bouncing off that 20 million. Some of it being construction, but you know, we are growing and we are getting more users and all of that stuff helps us. But the amount of water that we use doesn't really warrant a water tower at this point because of the cost. The one improvement that we made over the years is we took on the Ziegler water tank and pump house down there. That gives us 150,000 gallons of capacity. We don't fill it that high because our demand is not that high necessarily. But that helps on that well problem for us too. But that's just a very recent venture for us. So.
And Jim, I think this is the first time we're doing the well rehab, so we're talking about,
Yes.
we're 15 years later.
So to answer one other question that you threw out, we do have a capital fund, and we are putting money in it for things like this. So the ARPA money is just a bonus plan for us. We would have done this anyways, and it would have been a more extensive meeting for Elizabeth and I to have because I would have begged, and she would have had to search really hard to try to find the money. So I guess to answer your question is we do have a capital fund and we are funding it, and it is easier to fund with the more users that we have. People are hooking up and all of that money goes into that fund, pays the bonds for the construction of it, and then, you know, I believe we're not underground on it anymore, correct?
Mr. Mayor and council members, as of last year, we were not underwater. We were above water, but barely above water in our capital fund. Our connection fees builds our capital fund, and as we have more development, you know what I mean, our capital fund builds. But because we weren't having any development, you know, I was still having to do maintenance and such, and our water sales were not keeping up with the maintenance. And so, yes, I had to really find money in order to make it all happen over those years. But I am happy to say that we have crossed that bridge, but would not have been able to fund the amount of maintenance we had, to the tune of $150,000 or $200,000. That would have been tough. So without ARPA dollars, it would have been really tough to do this. So I think the timing was great, and it's a good use of the money because the money, that criteria, we meet the criteria right on. So for reporting, there will be no issue at all using the money for the purpose that Jim has outlined.
So if there are no more questions, that's the end of my report.
It's assistant to the city administrator's report.
I have no report this evening.
City administrator's report.
I just have one item, and Alex has indicated and just wanted to let everybody know that our local Board of Appeal and Equalization hearing, we just got the notice today, and the date that they chose for us is April 28th at 6:30. So I just wanted everyone to mark their calendars that that will be our local Board of Appeal and Equalization date. And I have nothing further.
Hang on, I gotta put it in my book. April 28th.
6:30, you said?
At 6:30, yes.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Which is a Thursday. All right, so where are we at? Announcements and reminders. City Council and Planning Commission joint meeting on February 16th at 6 p.m. Planning Commission, March 2nd at 6:30. City Council workshop meeting on March 8th at 5:30, and a City Council meeting on March 9th at 6 p.m. Calendar's on the back. Would someone make the motion to adjourn?
Janet. I move to adjourn.
This is Sue, I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. I'll call for a vote.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Shelley, I.
Jesse, aye. This meeting is adjourned.